1938 was the fifth year of the modern comic book format. The business was well established with a half-dozen publishers competing for sales. The year began with 13 titles with a cover date of January 1938. Feature Funnies number 4, cover date January 1938. Parts of this issue were reprinted from the Wags UK comic, issue number 24 from June 11th, 1937, published by Editor's Press Service. The cover art is by Rube Goldberg featuring Lollapalooza, who is also featured in a 4-page story written and drawn by Rube Goldberg, and it features reprints from the Frank J. Markey Syndicate. The Clock returned in this 7-page story from writer-artist George Brenner, and the story contained the characters The Clock and Captain Kane. Will Eisner returned with Hawks of the Seas in a 4-page story. He wrote and drew. The historical series was also reprinted from Wags UK, issue number 21 from May 21st, 1937. Funny Pages, volume 2, number 5 was published by Ultem Comics, January 1938. This is the very last month that Ultem Comics published any titles, 4 in total. Titles would be taken over by Centaur Comics starting in March of 1938. There is a mile-high pedigree copy of this comic from the Edgar Church collection. Highlights include a 1-page story, Mr. Whipple, with art presumably by Paul Gustafson, as he also did work on Uncle Johnny's Clarinet in a 5-page story under the alias PG, which is his initials, and also the 1-page story Spots, also signed as PG. Norman Daniels wrote the 6-page story Death on the Bottom, which features art by Fred Gardenier. Funny Picture Stories, Volume 2, Number 5, published by Ultem Comics, January 1938. This is the last issue from Ultem Comics. It features a cover art by Bob Wood. Stardust is a 1-page story written and drawn by Gil Fox, and it features a brief bio of the actor Joel McCrea, and there are small cartoons of Deanna Durbin, Alan Dinehart, and Nelson Eddy. Feature Books number 9 featured Dick Tracy, published by David McKay Publications, January 1938. This was the 4th and final issue of Feature Book dedicated to Dick Tracy. There is a Billy Wright pedigree copy of this issue, and this issue does feature black and white strip reprints from 1935 to 37, including editing, and these come from different Dick Tracy strips. And the Dick Tracy cover is by Chester Gould, and contained in this issue is 70 pages worth of Dick Tracy content. Star Comics number 9, published by Ultem Comics, January 1938. This is the last issue from Ultem Comics. It features a Charles Biro cover. And some of the highlights include Salute to a Doctor, a 1-page story drawn by Fred Gardenier. He also drew Dan Hastings, an 8-page story written possibly by Ken Fitch, an early science fiction story. Paul Gustafson, signed with PG, gave us Jingle Jingle in a 1-page story. Fred Schwab wrote and drew Politics, a 1-page story which would later be reprinted in Captain America Comics number 13 from Timely Comics in 1942, but it would be recolored. And Charles Biro gave us the 2-page story Goobyland. Star Ranger number 9 is the last issue from Ultem Comics. Cover date January 1938. It rates a 7 or scarce from the Gerber Photojournal Guide to Comic Books, and there's a Billy Wright pedigree copy of this comic. It features cover art by Fred Schwab. Ace Comics number 11, published by David McKay Publications, January 1938. Some of the highlighted features include Blondie, Jungle Jim, and Ripley's Believe It or Not. Detective Comics number 11, published by DC Comics, January 1938. There is a Billy Wright pedigree copy of this issue. The cover art is by Craig Flessel, showing Speed Saunders, who also is featured in a 6-page story written and drawn by Craig Flessel. Larry Steele returns in a 6-page story from writer-artist Will Eli. Craig Flessel also draws Incident in Algiers, a 6-page story written by Whitney Ellsworth and features the first appearance of Sergeant Bill Gaines. Siegel and Schuster team up once again for Spy, a 4-page story, and also for Slam Bradley, their lengthy 13-page story, Detective Mystery, this one featuring the first appearance of the villain Baron von Gotz. Famous Explorer is a one-page story drawn by Will Eli. The Funnies, number 16 from Dell Comics, January 1938, features a Mutt and Jeff Christmas cover. Some of the highlighted characters include Dan Dunn in a 4-page story from Norman Marsh, Don Dixon and the Hidden Empire, 2-page story, an early science fiction story from writer Bob Moore with art by Carl Pfeiffer, and Moore and Pfeiffer team up also for Tad of the Tanbark in a 1-page story. Sheldon Mayer returns in a 2-page scribbly story, and Tailspin Tommy returns in a 3-page story from writer Glenn Chafin with art by Hal Forrest. And Hal Forrest also draws and writes 4 Aces in a 1-page story. Tip Top Comics, number 21, published by United Feature Syndicate, January 1938. There is a mile-high pedigree copy of this issue from the Edgar Church collection. Tarzan is featured as the cover story. Other highlights include Little Abner, Captain and the Kids, Ella Cinders, Jim Hardy, Bronco Bill, and Fritzy Ritz. King Comics number 22, published by David McKay Publications, January 1938. The cover art is by Joe Musial. It features Popeye. There is a Lost Valley pedigree copy of this issue. New Adventure Comics number 23, published by DC Comics, January 1938. There's a Billy Wright pedigree copy of this issue. Gerber rates it an 8 for rarity. Craig Flessel did the cover artwork, and he also did the 4-page story Steve Conrad Adventurer, which he wrote and drew. Dale Daring returns in a 2-page story from writer-artist Will Eli. Robin Hood makes his first appearance in DC Comics in the 4-page story written and drawn by Sven Elven, a black and white adventure based on historical facts. And Federal Men returns in a 4-page story from Siegel and Schuster. The detective mystery features the G-Girls in their first appearance, and the Junior G-Men also appear. Steve Carson does not appear in this story. And Will Eli writes and draws Nadir, Master of Magic, the 4-page fantasy supernatural story. Popular Comics number 24, published by Dell Comics, January 1938. Some of the highlights include Dick Tracy in a 4-page story from Chester Gould, Little Orphan Annie, 4 pages from Harold Gray, Terry and the Pirates, 2 pages from Milt Caniff, and Don Winslow of the Navy in a 2-page story from writer Lieutenant F.E. Martinek with art by Leon Beroth. Mickey Mouse Magazine number 28, also known as Volume 3, Number 4, published by Western Publishing, January 1938. The Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs serial begins in this issue, and this issue was on the newsstands before the release of the movie. Donald Duck Sunday strips reprints begin under the title Ducky Symphony, and the New Year's cover features Donald Duck and Goofy. More Fun Comics number 28, published by DC Comics, January 1938. The majority of this issue is reprinted in Double Action Comics number 2 in January 1940, also from DC Comics. The New Year Baby welcomes the year on this Vincent Sullivan cover. There is a mile-high pedigree copy of this issue from the Edgar Church collection. Highlights include Sandra of the Secret Service, a 3-page story from artist Will Eli, and this detective mystery was reprinted in Double Action Comics number 2 in 1940. Dr. Occult appears in a 4-page story from Siegel and Schuster under the alias Leaguer and Ruths in their fantasy supernatural story, and it's also reprinted later in Double Action Comics number 2 in 1940. Hanko the Cowhand returns on a 2-page story from artist Craig Flessel, and it's reprinted in Double Action Comics number 2 in 1940. Craig Flessel also writes and draws Pep Morgan in a 2-page story. Radio Squad return in a 2-page story from Siegel and Schuster. Mark Marson of the Interplanetary Police is a 2-page story drawn by Tom Hickey, an early science fiction story which is reprinted in Double Action Comics number 2 in 1940. Will Eli draws Johnny Law for 4 pages in this detective mystery story, which is later reprinted in Double Action Comics number 2 in 1940. And Will Eli also gives us Jack Woods, a 4-page detective mystery story, which is also reprinted in Double Action Comics number 2 in 1940. Famous Funnies number 42 from Eastern Color, January 1938. Still the longest running modern comic book of the time. The cover art features the characters Okie Dokes and Sam Smithers. Highlights include Life's Like That, a 1-page cartoon from Fred Nair, copyright The Consolidated News. War on Crime returns in a 3-page story from writer Rex Collier, art possibly by Kemp Starrett. This is the first crime story published monthly in Modern Comics, copyright the Ledger Syndicate. And Bobby returns in a 1-page story from writer-artist S.M. Iger, and this children's story is copyright Eisner Iger.